Hello friends and welcome back to Swiftlessons. Today I want to just take some time to answer one of the questions that I get very often as a guitar instructor, and that is, what is it that I'm thinking about when I solo or improvise? So I'm going to give you 6 different things that you can consider when you're soloing, and they are in no particular order of importance. Now the first thing that I'm probably considering is scales. Now the scale that I choose to play with is dependent upon the progression that I'm playing over top of. Now I'm a blues rock guitar, so very often I'm playing over top of 1, 4, 5 progressions or some kind of derivative of that progression. So in that particular case, then I'm going to be picturing my blues scale. Okay, there it is in the E position, okay. And because I like to mix together minor and major licks, I will also be considering my major pentatonic scale. Okay, so in that musical context of a blues tune, a 1, 4, 5 progression, really any combination of those two scales is going to sound fantastic. Now remember, the chord progression always dictates which scale you're going to use. So if it was like a 1, 6, 4, 5, a traditional pop pattern, then I would probably want to stick to this major scale over top of a progression like that that isn't necessarily bluesy. Let's say it was a 1 minor 5 4 progression. Well, that's a progression that always signals to me that it's time to use the Mixolydian scale, another example of how a progression can tell you which scale you need to use, and there's a little bit of memorization that goes into that. Okay, so there you have the first thing that you should be considering, scales. Remember always that not every scale is a one-size-fits-all. Different progressions require different scales to being able to play over top of them. Now, the next thing that you should be considering is the chord in which you're playing over top of. Now, if I take a look at a chord like C dominant 7 here, okay, barring the 8th fret, 10th fret of the A string, and also the 9th fret of the G string, I'm going to look at every single note inside of this chord as being one that I can use inside of a given lick or melody. Okay, so if I'm going through my my blues scale, and I rest on a note that's inside of the chord, I'm very, very certain that it's going to sound good, okay? Even if it's a note that's not also inside of the blues scale. Okay, like this major third here on the 9th fret of the G string. I might also consider different versions of this C7 chord, like my pinky going to the 11th fret of the B string. Okay, playing that dominant 7 right here. Alright, I might also consider a chord like C13, taking the pinky down to the 10th fret. Okay, and then consider that note inside some of my licks here. Okay, so taking a look at the C7 chord shape, or even better, that C13 chord. Blending its notes with those that I find inside the scale. Okay, I can also find harmonies inside of the chord. Right there, or so many different possibilities when you're considering the scales and also the chord that you're playing over top of. Okay, so now you have 2 things that you can consider when you're soloing. Scales and also the notes that are inside of the chord. Now, the third thing that you might want to consider is the incoming chord. So let's just keep it simple and say we're playing over top of a blues progression, like C going to F. Okay, in this case I'm playing F9. Now, if that's what's going to happen inside the progression, then I want to know how many beats I'm going to have before that change. Then I want to create a lick that's going to end right on a note that is inside of the chord. Okay, and it has to be the right length, the right number of beats. So if I'm playing 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, that means I have to come up with a lick that is 4 beats long and then ends on a note that is going to comply with this 4 chord F7 or F9 here, okay? Okay, so let's see if I can come up with an example here. Going from the C to the F in 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You see, I slid up to a note that is inside of an F major chord. It's the major third of that chord. So that's why that lick kind of seemed to usher in the 4 chord. You could hear the progression inside of that lick. So there's the 1. All right, and then that right there is the note that is inside of the F chord. It's gonna sound fantastic over this 4 chord inside my blues progression. Okay, very good everybody. So far we're considering scales. We're considering the chord that you're playing over top of. Okay, borrowing some notes out of the different versions of that chord. And that could also be harmonies that you find inside of the chord shape that can be implemented into your licks. We're also considering the incoming chord. So you're playing over top of the 1. All right, then you're considering the incoming chord. Finding a note that is inside of that incoming chord that's gonna sound good. Now, the next thing that you might want to consider is styles, genre, licks, tradition. Those are all really one thing. For me, it means kind of summoning the ideas that were used by some of my favorite guitar players. So if I'm jamming over top of a progression, I might invoke a little B.B. King. A little Thrill Is Gone there. I might think about Jimi Hendrix. Or a little bit of Chuck Berry. Right? Those are all things that are very, very important to me. Now, in the same vein is the style of the track. For example, if I'm playing over top of a country progression, then I also want to have some ready-made country licks. At my disposal, okay? So, be sure to consider your favorite guitar players, pull little tricks from them whenever you meet a great guitar player at a party or a jam session, see what you can learn from them, and also consider the style in which you're playing over top of and see if you can really play that style convincingly. You don't have to be an encyclopedia of different licks, just learn enough so that way you can be able to fool around in those particular genres. Okay, very good everybody. So far you're considering scales, you're considering the chord that you're playing over top of, the incoming chord, and if you want to take that to the next level, consider the entire progression that you're playing over top of. Styles, licks, and traditions, keeping track of the tricks that you hear from your favorite guitar players, and also learning lines that are specific to certain genres. Now, the next thing that I want to talk to you about is a very, very simple concept that is often ignored by many different guitar players, and that is phrasing, particularly the use of space or empty space between your lines. So very often I'll hear guitar players play through a solo, and they'll just play an endless stream of notes, hammer-ons, pull-offs, bends, just going crazy. There's a ton of quantity, not a whole lot of quality. So what I recommend that you do is break your licks up into shorter, more memorable, melodic lines, then allow for a little bit of space or allow your notes to ring out a little longer. A great thing to do is to listen to horn players. They tend to play very short, catchy lines, then they have to get their breath. So their melodies are only as long as their breath allows it to be. Then they have to take a breath and they can restart. This actually gives them a little bit of an advantage over guitar players because it forces them to think more melodically and to use their time more efficiently. So play through some basic lines. Allow notes to ring out. Hold your bends out. Okay, allow some open space. Okay, allow some notes to be staccato, nice and short. And others to be long. Okay, staccato versus legato, open space versus allowing notes to ring out. It's a great thing to think about when you're putting together a solo. Okay, very, very good, everybody. Now you're considering 5 tips for creating a professional sounding solo. Now for your final tip, dynamics. This is a very important thing to consider. Again, a very simple concept that is often ignored by many, many different guitar players. So, dynamics. This means that you're following the band, you're trying to set the mood, you're trying to tell the story, you're mixing together high volume sounds versus low volume sounds. So, peaks and valleys in your performance. Okay, so over the course of your practice sessions, I want you to rehearse playing lines with a very low down kind of vibe. So that's the same exact lick that I played in our previous section, this time nice and quiet. Picturing the band being real sneaky, the drummer kind of laying low on the kit. Okay, maybe start off with less notes, a lot more allowing the guitar to sing. Okay, the chord change, I'm just picturing that 4 chord. Alright, and then as the energy builds, the 5. And then bring it back down, okay? So I just played over a 12-bar blues, at least in my mind, where I started off nice and low, then I built up the energy. As the 5 chord came in, I was hitting the roof. Then, as the progression came back around, I brought the energy way back down, okay? So that's what you want to consider when you're playing your solo. You always want to consider those peaks and those valleys, in addition to the scales, the chord you're playing over top of, the incoming chord or the entire progression, the styles, licks, and traditions of your favorite guitar players, and also the phrasing. Thanks everybody for checking out this video. I hope that these tips kind of struck a chord with you, no pun intended, and that you'll be able to put some of these things to work in your solos. Moving forward, I definitely recommend that you record and write all the time and give yourself little sections in your tunes where you can compose your own solos. Good luck and enjoy your practice.